So the National Association of Broadcasters has put its hand up to assist community radio stations gutted by violent scene this week. The association says it's deeply saddened by the carnage caused on the country's broadcasting and telecommunications infrastructure. About 4 community radio stations were targeted, causing some of them to shut down at short notice. What does the attacking of these media outlets say about how some residents view community media? Let's unpack this for you now. Bring in Sipho Motau. He's the operations manager at Mams Radio. It's one of the outlets affected. Also joining our discussion is Kate Skinner, an independent media researcher. To both our guests, thanks very much indeed for your time. It's lovely to have you on the program. Sipho, if we can start with you, help us paint the picture of the extent of the damage suffered where you work.
The damage is worth between 1 million to 1.5 billion. The most unfortunate part is that when they were looting, whatever they couldn't take, they were just breaking it, of which it's both the broadcasting studio, the transmission room, where they even broke the transmitter, and there were some laptops in the offices that have been looted, even the recording devices. The backup generator that we are using when there is no electricity in the mall, it has also been looted.
Typically, for community radio stations, people are plugged into what actually happens there. Have you received any information, perhaps from other community members, about why one would target the radio station?
As it stands right now, we've opened a case. The police are investigating, but so far so good. I think we are having a sense of direction to say who might be involved in all of this. But one thing that I must adamantly say is that the community love Mams Radio. They would never do this to their station. Even they're calling right now to say, please, who are the people who have done this? Tell us, we want to deal with them. And we tell them straight to say, let the police conclude the investigations and we'll take him from there. But being honest with you, every day I'm receiving phone calls and messages of support, people saying we love Mams Radio and would love to see it back as soon as possible on air.
That's really encouraging. Kate, if we can bring you into this discussion, I mean, I'm not quite sure what to make of the fact that community radio stations in particular have been targeted here, especially because at the onset of the unrest, we were mostly being convinced that this has to do with socio-economic ills because of poverty, for instance, in many communities. It's incredibly difficult to see how attacking a radio station helps solve that problem.
Yeah, it is incredibly strange. And so, people have said that, when you look at some of the saboteurs around infrastructure, then radio stations would be included as part of that infrastructure. So when you don't want your communities to understand what is going on and you don't want them to have a good sense of, literally what's happening on the ground and kind of, moment by moment, what's happening, then you'll go and you'll target your community radio station because they are that important. And so it's definitely not just normal crime. It's definitely, I would completely agree with Sipho. People love their community radio stations. And certainly from my side and from the people I've spoken to, there's a sense of huge support for those radio stations. So it's more, I think, and it's difficult to say. And I also would agree with people that you have to have the police investigate this. And it's not like a lot of information has come out yet, but there is a sense that this is something a bit more sinister than just people going in, because also, again, what are you going to get from that? Getting equipment, that's not really going to help you. It's not a poverty crime. It's something a little more problematic.
It does come into a greater context, doesn't it, where several of our colleagues have felt that they've found it quite difficult to do their work, especially during the unrest. If you're not being threatened, perhaps, by people who are part of the criminality, it's safe to say, you certainly feel that you're not protected because the sanctity of media freedom almost doesn't seem to be respected. It's difficult to see this outside of that context.
Well, and I think it's an international phenomenon. So I think it's really important to see it in that international context. There are populist leaders all over the world, including, Donald Trump, Duterte, Bolsonaro. There are people all over the world that don't like the media. They don't like that level of scrutiny. They don't want the media to look into their personal affairs, into the, implications of their politics on the ground. And so they have now come out quite strongly to say, stop the media, the media are part of false news, fake news, etc. And I think that that's exceptionally dangerous, because what you're needing is the media to be there to tell the stories on the ground, what's happening, the 360-degree view of things. And when you stop the media doing that, it means citizens don't get the information that they need. And that's not good for democracy.
100%. And Sipho, let me bring you back. Do you get a sense that people are making those connections even in communities where Mams Radio is actually operating? Essentially, this idea that it's in no one's interest for a community radio station like yours to be attacked like this.
No, to be quite honest with you, as it stands, this is organized crime. I'll be honest with you, the community love the station and would never do anything to harm it. Unfortunately, as Mams Radio, we started now, after I took on programming, we started to report on issues that have never been touched before. There are certain things that are happening in the community, especially in other sectors and spheres that nobody wants to talk about. As Mams Radio, we came in as the new kid on the block. Suddenly we are this nuisance because now we are starting to report on issues that makes certain individuals to feel uncomfortable in the community. So when such happens, to be quite honest with you, I would still refer to it as organized crime and being targeted. But as it stands on the ground, people are trying by all means to help us. Credit to the likes of Don Laka, his Mamelodi legend, is trying by all means to make sure that we bounce back as soon as possible, including Jacaranda FM and Michael Wells from Tax FM. But being honest with you, it's quite disappointing.
I'm glad to hear there's some kind of collaboration. It does raise questions about ways through which, as media colleagues, we can assist each other at a time like this. Sipho, are you getting a sense that that is the spirit in which many have responded to what's taking place? In other words, other platforms using their influence to speak out against this unequivocally?
No, honestly speaking, I'm happy with how the commercial media and the public broadcaster has responded positively to condemn such acts. And I still call upon other, organizations to come forth. And even right now, we call anyone that has a connection with private investigators. We need, private investigators as much as we can to help the police, because at the end of the day, justice should prevail. If they can start by attacking community media, what's next? Because at the end of the day, it's all about information. Mams Radio, it's a beacon of light, a beacon of hope. And if you destroy a center of information, definitely you are surely killing the DNA of the community, because the community cannot be able to connect, the community cannot be able to interact, and even the history is going to be distorted. Who's going to influence life in a positive way, and even the lifestyle? But with everybody else coming on board as a station, we are more than excited.
Yeah, Kate, it's interesting what Sipho says. He's asking, if they start with community radio stations, what's next? What's been quite troubling is how perhaps some people have actually understated the importance of community radio stations, and obviously that also is an incredible error.
It is a huge error, because I think that, often when people look at the media sector, they look at the public broadcaster and they look at the commercial media, and they don't look at the community media and its role to the same extent. And often it's the tier of media that is underfunded and isn't given the kind of support that the mainstream media, the big commercial players and the SABC are given. And the thing is that if you're wanting to know what's happening in the country, you actually need all three tiers of media. And to undermine the community media sector and to see it as less important is highly problematic. Because if you look at where community media is in fact based, it's often in poorer communities. It's also in areas that sometimes the mainstream media does not cover. So, rural areas, small towns, and you need to actually know what's happening across the country in order to understand, what's happening politically, socioeconomically. And so, I think that, we need to make sure that the community media sector is supported, through funds, through government support, through policy, through legislation, regulations, to ensure that it plays its absolutely critical role.
Yeah, the real concern for many people, not only those in community media, Kate, but I guess across the industry, is the safety of journalists as well. It comes back to my question around the sanctity of media freedom. I wonder how we should respond to especially that issue in the wake of what we've seen taking place this week.
Yeah, safety, and I mean, I think safety has become such a big issue. And again, it's so interesting because it's a huge issue internationally. And it's been a huge issue around COVID, of course. And it's interesting because it's a big issue online and in the physical world. And I think that, again, for community media, sometimes, community media doesn't have the kind of support in terms of safety that some of the big media houses have. So, for instance, if you were looking at COVID, access to all of the PPE equipment, clothing, etc., just because community media is not as wealthy, it hasn't had access to that kind of thing. And sometimes not access to the levels of training, that the big media houses have. But I think what is interesting is that over this incredibly difficult period, people have started to focus on that and saying, it's an issue that we have got to be concerned about. And in fact, there needs to be specific training around it, because there are particular things that you can do to ensure your safety or to better ensure your safety if you have that kind of training. And it's interesting, there is a particular organization called the Committee for the Protection of Journalists based in New York. And in fact, they have produced a lot of training. South Africans have produced a lot of training. We definitely need to prioritize that.
Absolutely. Sipho, a parting shot from you. How else can people help?
As a radio station right now, we're going to be setting up a satellite studio at the Boston Media House, courtesy of Jacaranda FM and Tax FM. And meanwhile, we are calling to everyone that can assist with any kind of donation so that we can be able to rebuild our studios. They're welcome to contact me. I'll leave you with my contact details and everything. They can contact me, Fiona or Godfrey. Yes, the three of us, we are on the ground day to day, 24/7. We are available. Any kind of donation that can assist to put Mams Radio out there. We don't need money. We just need resources so that we can come back and broadcast in our beloved community again.
Yeah, I can understand your apprehension of giving your number on air. Is there a place perhaps on social media where people can find you?
No, definitely. I can even give my numbers on air. It's
Sure.
073 556 0272, or they can email sipom@mamsradio.co.za.
Right, Sipho, thanks very much indeed. That number again, 073 556 0272. To both our guests, thanks very much indeed for helping us ventilate these sometimes complex issues. Kate Skinner is an independent media researcher. Joining us there is also Motau, who's the operations manager at Mams Radio. Once again, I appreciate your time.